Hello and welcome to another Victoria 3 Developer Diary. This time we're going to be talking all about states, but first off we've got a new lovely bit of cover art for the game for this Dev Diary, and it looks really nice. Again, just every time we're seeing one of these new pieces of artwork, I just feel the need to mention that I love the art style, and whoever's doing these images are doing a fantastic job. But yes, before we get into the Dev Diary itself, we do have a couple of little teaser images. And this time it's not just from Martin, because we also have one from Groogy. He's been working on giving local flavour to various parts of the map through these state modifiers. So first off, we have this Burmese teak. I guess I say first off, but it's kind of the only one. We have the Burmese teak giving building hardwood output at a cost of some state region infrastructure in the, I guess, the region of Burma. And also, if we scroll up just a little bit, Father Loris, who I do the NoCB podcast with, who is very knowledgeable about coal, loves himself some coal, and apparently Welsh coal, which is apparently really good, is going to be covered in Victoria 3 as well. So we're probably going to have a state modifier for Wales to improve the quality of your coal, which, yeah, Father Loris would be very happy about that. Moving on to Martin's, though, we have here tomorrow's Dev Diary is a roundup on states and how a variety of different mechanics relating to them work. As a teaser, here's a look at the Homelands, one of the said mechanics that ties both to states and to cultures. And if we open this up, we can see we have Brittany here. We can see that there are two groups of people, the French and the Britons, that consider Brittany its homeland. You can see how much infrastructure, the infrastructure usage, we've seen all that before. And also there is a state modifier, I think that's the Loire River, but my knowledge of French geography and the French rivers is not perfect, so I'm not sure exactly what this will end up being. But yeah, that's Brittany, and that is that state. And let's go and have a look at states in general and see if there's anything more to be gleaned, any information. And obviously there's going to be more. I don't know why I said if. Whatever. It's Thursday again for the people who read this on the day it came out, which was me. I did read this one previously, actually. It's Thursday again, and again I do these videos a little bit later so that we can get the developer comments in, because I think there's a lot of value in them. And it means it's time for another Victoria 3 Dev Diary. Today's Dev Diary is going to be a little bit different in that it will mostly be about collecting and further explaining the various mechanics that tie into states. There might not be a whole lot of new information here for people who have been closely following the development, like all of you who've been watching my videos, but we feel it's important to put all this information in the same place and clarify on a few points. So, to the topic of states. States that we previously touched on are the main political geographic unit of Victoria 3, where pops live and buildings are built. Before we proceed, it'll be useful to understand the difference between states and state regions. A state is always controlled by a single country, and its borders are dynamic and can change over the course of the game, including being created and destroyed, while state regions can contain one or several states and have a static border which is unchanging throughout the game. If a single country owns all provinces within a state region, there is no practical difference between these concepts, but if more than one country owns provinces within a single state region, they will each control individual states within it. Right. So the way that I like to try and understand these this breakdown of the units of land in the game is to try and maybe compare it to other games, or maybe even we could make a map. So I've just quickly drawn this up in Paint. It doesn't look like any specific province in the world, it's just something I've completely made up. The large black outline is going to be your state region, right? This is the one that we've just been talking about. A state region is very large. It consists of multiple states, and if you own all of the states within the state region, it's just the state, right? As we saw with Brittany, all of Brittany is owned by France, so it would just be called the state of Brittany. If multiple countries own pieces of land inside Brittany, then, well, for however they're going to do that, then it will be things like Brittany, if you own the majority of it, and maybe English Brittany if they own like a treaty port in Brittany somewhere. So we have the state region. Each one of these little individual pieces of land is where armies are walking, right? These are the smallest unit of divisible land, but you do not interact with them on this level. A state it says there that the borders can change over time, and the way that I am taking this to mean is a state could be this, or if you have increased the amount of land you're taking from France, say this is Brittany, say you've increased the amount of land you're taking from France, then your state could be this. And while you, as England, say, are going to be able to interact with this state, you're not going to be able to interact with the individual, let's call them provinces, within the state. This is just for army movement. You're controlling this. Whereas, say, France owns all of the rest of this land, they're going to be on their interactions, they're going to be interacting with all of this at once. They don't get to interact with individual makeups or little individual provinces within that. They can only interact with the entire state on the state level. That's the way that I'm understanding this. If I'm wrong, please clarify for me in the comment section below, but that is the way that I'm understanding it. There is the breakup of land where your armies can move, then there is the breakup of land into states, and states can be split up only if they are multiple countries owning land within the state. So, for example, we have the state region of Rhineland. It's predominantly a set of provinces on the border of France that in 1836 contains two states. The Prussian Rhineland, which is only called just Rhineland because they contain more than half the land in the region, and Bavarian Rhineland, called Bavarian Rhineland to distinguish it from the Prussian parts, a concept that we'll call a split state. Over the course of the game, which exact provinces make up the state region of Rhineland will never change, but the states might. If France were to conquer the Prussian Rhineland, it would of course no longer be a Prussian Rhineland, but a French Rhineland. And if Prussia were to conquer the Bavarian Rhineland, the entire state region would be unified into a single Prussian state. If France were to take half of the Prussian-controlled Rhineland, so that nobody has more than half of the land in the Rhineland, we would have 3 states within the state region of Rhineland. There would be Prussian Rhineland, French Rhineland, and Bavarian Rhineland. This kind of very dynamic breakup of provinces is very interesting. It's not something we have seen before. Victoria 2 had a very basic type of it, in that you could take treaty ports, usually from the Chinese, let's be honest, where you could take single little territories or provinces out of the major state, right? Other than that, the only way you could take land from somebody was to take an entire state at once. This seemingly is no longer the case. So yeah, that's the way that I'm understanding it, right? So if we go back to our example here, if we've got England taking up this piece of land, right? And we've got France taking up this piece of land. And then say the Spanish come along and they take this piece of land. And say, I didn't calculate them, but say none of these are over half of the total amount of land in Brittany. Then we would have a Spanish Brittany, an English Brittany, or maybe a British Brittany, and a French Brittany. And that is the way that I'm understanding this. Hopefully that has kind of clarified it for you as well, if this wasn't good enough. I know originally when I saw this, I looked at this here. A state is always controlled by a single country, and its borders are dynamic, to potentially mean fluid borders, which is something we've never seen before in a Paradox game. This isn't true. This isn't the way it works. But I believe the way that I've just explained it with the map there is the way it works. So, you can't interact with a state, anything within a state on an individual little territory basis. You are interacting at the state level, whereas if you own the entirety of the state region, then you are interacting on that state region level. A state and a state region can be the same thing. But yeah, if it's a split state, then you are interacting on the state level, not the state region level, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. And another example here, we have political control of the region of Rajputana is split between numerous Indian princes, none of which control enough of the region for their part to be considered Rajputana proper. So we've also, in Jodhpur, it's a split state, and Bikaner, Jaisalmer, Mewar, Jodhpur, and Jaipur all control a piece of that state. So each one of these is, sorry, each control a piece of that state region. So this is the breakup that we see of this. In addition to political ownership, there are a number of conditions that apply to a state that affects the local population and economy. First of all, there's something called incorporation status, representing a state's political status within the country that owns it. Different incorporation states are as follows. An incorporated state is a state that is a fully integrated political unit in the country. This state incurs full bureaucracy costs, pays all forms of taxes required by the government, and gets the benefit of all national institutions. An unincorporated state is a state that is owned but only very lightly administered by the country, such as frontier states. Unincorporated states do not incur any bureaucracy costs, but only pay certain taxes, such as consumption taxes. They get no benefits from national institutions and have reduced infrastructure. And finally, we've got the colonial state, which is a state that is considered to be an overseas colony. Works similarly to an unincorporated state, but also gets increased immigration at the expense of even lower infrastructure. So we've got a lot of different types of states. This is a lot more invested than the is it a core or is not a core in Victoria 2. This seems pretty reasonable, no problem with that. It is possible to incorporate any unincorporated or colonial state as long as you have the bureaucracy that would be needed to properly administer it, but this can be a rocky process. While the increased costs kick in immediately, the benefits, taxes, institutions, and so on are only gradually phased in over time. The time it takes depends on how easy it is for your country to integrate the local population. It would be a lot more difficult for Britain to incorporate an Indian state than it would be for them to incorporate the Falklands, for example. Other conditions that can apply to a state include, but is not an exhaustive list, if it is the capital state. All pops living in the capital state have increased political power. Market capital is the economic capital of the country. It has increased infrastructure and migration attraction. These can be different. As we've seen in the United States, we've got Washington, D.C. as the capital state, or I don't know if it's in a state of its own, because it's not a state in real life. I have no idea, but Washington is the capital, and the market capital is New York. So that's the way that breakdown works. Turmoil, a state that has too many political radicals as a percentage of population will experience turmoil. A state with turmoil suffers penalties in the form of increased tax waste and reduced migration attraction. These penalties can be reduced by investing into the police institution. So we've got Pennsylvania here. It's an incorporated state contributing both taxes and a star on the flag to the United States of America. The USA's flag is dynamic based on the amount of states that are in it. This has already been confirmed, and we've seen multiple screenshots now of US flags with different amounts of stars. So that's really cool that that's been added. I wonder if we're going to go into if it's dynamic enough to model flags that don't exist, right? Say you are very expansionist and you take way more of Mexico than the USA did previously, and you incorporate all of the Mexican states that you've taken. Can you end up with a 60-star American flag? Is that possible? Is that in the game? How many stars do the Americans need to have on their flag? Let's be honest. I wonder how many we're going to be able to see on that flag. It'll be interesting, but maybe, yeah, like I said, it's only the Americans that do this kind of 1 star for every state, so how much time and effort is really worth putting into giving the Americans 100 different versions of their flag? Probably not worth that much, I would argue. But yeah, that's Pennsylvania. It's an incorporated state. It costs 161.5 bureaucracy, which includes the institution cost and also the amount of population there. Yeah, it's cool. Moving on, we have states that have inherent conditions from their state regions, including state traits, which we've seen previously, including the one that we just saw for Burmese teak in Gurugi's teaser. As explained in the infrastructure dev diary, these represent a wide variety of geographical features that have an impact on the economy, infrastructure, and/or population of the entire state region. We have claims. A state region can be claimed by a country that does not currently own it, but are broadly considered to have a legitimate reason to think they maybe should. We'll come back to this when talking about diplomacy and war. Looking forward to that specifically. And homelands. Every culture has one or more state regions that most people in that culture consider to be their natural homeland. This does not consider the views of anyone outside of that culture. For example, the Swedes don't get a say in which state regions the Russians consider to be their homelands, and vice versa, and certain effects that we'll go over in later dev diaries. I wonder if the Russians are going to consider Finland as a part of their homeland, because Finland was a principality under the Russians since the North, what's called the Great Northern War, the one that Finland was given over to Russia when Sweden lost it. But it was never incorporated, and I don't think it should be a homeland for them. But that is the only piece of contention between Sweden and Russia that I can think of. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with regards to Finland. We've got guano here. It's a central pillar of the Peruvian economy in the mid-19th century, and a war was even fought over control of the Chincha Islands between Spain and Peru. The icon for this particular state trait is a placeholder, but yeah, we got the Chincha Islands there with 20% extra sulfur mine building throughput. Very nice bonus to have indeed, actually. Very nice. And also a lot of icons up here, many of which we don't actually know the what they mean yet, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a future dev diary for sure. As mentioned all the way back in the dev diary about buildings, states are limited in which resource industry building types they can support and how large these can get. For example, the degree of iron deposits in a state limits how many levels of iron mine you can build there. These resource limits are actually a property of state regions, which is dynamically allocated to the states in the region based on how large of a share the state holds. It's worth noting that this proportion isn't just based on the raw number of provinces owned. As an example, potential for fisheries are distributed according to the amount of coastline a state has in the state region, while arable land can be heavily weighted by the amount of prime land is in each state. While not applicable everywhere, prime land is something we use in states where there is a clear division between fertile and non-fertile land. Control of the Nile should matter a lot more to a state in Upper Egypt's arable land than controlling the surrounding desert, for example. It's also possible for a state region to contain discoverable resources. These are resources such as oil, gold, or rubber that are either not known about or not considered exploitable at the start of the game, but may be discovered and exploited at a later point. Certain technologies will affect both which resources can be discovered and the actual chance of said resource being discovered. All this functions in a weighted random fashion, so while the chance of there being a Klondike gold rush at some point during the game is high, it probably won't happen exactly at the same date it did historically, which works entirely perfectly well, I think. You shouldn't be able to know, on this date we're going to have gold rush, so let's prepare our country for a discovery that we shouldn't know about at this point. Which is something that we had an issue with in Victoria 2, where all of the oil was, like, the locations were already known, so you would go and you would take these oil-rich provinces early, way before there was oil there, so that you had it when the oil popped, and when you needed it, which was very awkward and very not very historical, right? But it was the meta way to play. Things like taking Burma, for example, or Borneo, for the oil there, was something that a lot of players did before there was any real drive to take that land. So yeah, the Yukon Territory has a discoverable resource, so that's what this means, oil and gold there. There are undiscovered resource deposits in the state. These resources have a chance to be discovered each day if the state is part of a non-isolated state region. And that's all for today. Next week we'll be continuing on the topic of politics as I explain how migration works. Very nice. All right. As I said, we will be going over to the comment section to see what we have over there. And here we are. The developers have replied to a bunch of comments. So, just to be clear, state regions are divided into states, and the number of those states is constant. If France conquers half of Prussian Rhineland, there won't be a possibility of Rhineland splitting into 3 instead of 2 states. There are some ways in which states can be partitioned. The main one we have in game right now is treaty port, but we're also considering the possibility of partitioning along cultural lines. I am very curious as to how this is going to happen, right? Because they don't track population on an individual province scale. They know the population in the state in its entirety. So things like the Rhineland. They know that there are a certain amount of French pops and a certain amount of German pops in the Rhineland. But the only way that they know where they are is when they make a guess based on what industries or what jobs are in that state and where those jobs are. So if the arable land, for example, is heavily in the French region and the industrialized piece of the Rhineland is in the German region, and you've got a lot of German pops working in the industry and a lot of French pops working in the arable land, then you know basically where the cultures are going to be based on those jobs. But that isn't going to work all the time because there's no distance between jobs in a state, as far as we're aware, right? So if a bunch of French people get some jobs in the industry sector in Prussian Rhineland, or just in Rhineland, I should say, then how does that work? If a lot of French pops start being in the industrial sector and less in the arable sector, are we then going to assume that the French population has moved over to that part? And where are you going to draw these cultural lines? It's so muddy. I don't think it works too terribly well. I'm sure there are going to be more comments about that as we move on. I absolutely love the thing with claims and homelands. How is a claim different from a core in Vic 2? Would say the Ottomans have claims on Cairo while not considering it a homeland. I can't imagine claims are static and can't be fabricated. Or I do imagine claims are static and can't be fabricated. Also, can we make an incorporated state into an unincorporated state, like one in EU4, thus freeing bureaucracy for incorporating another one? So claims and homelands are quite separate mechanics. A claim is essentially a country having a rightful cause to take land, and you get a claim if a fully incorporated state is conquered from you. Homelands is more about where a culture feels their natural homelands lie, and while there is some interaction with diplomacy and war there, it isn't as simple as Anhalt just having cause to take over Prussia because it's North German homelands. Okay, makes sense. I wonder if the Greeks will consider much of Anatolia to be their homeland, or how long past is it that the Greeks will then not consider Anatolia their homeland? Who knows? Will it be possible to mod a way for the state-region borders to change over the course of the game? At the moment, it's not possible, but it's something that we'd like to make possible after release. Will the province level still matter when it comes to building factories? So, for example, if a part of the state are mountain provinces, will the whole state get an infrastructure penalty, even in the large cities are in plains, and therefore the mountains would not matter when it comes to railroad construction? We're looking basically at Lombardy in this, where the entire state has the Alpine infrastructure penalty, even though the majority of Lombardy is not in the mountains. In the case of mines, will the provinces that historically would contain them also get the construction potential if you split the state or conquer only part of that with the mine? Instead of, for example, every province gets 1/10 of the max mine capacity, regardless of where it is. So, here it is. We don't have province mechanics on this level. Nothing is built on the province level. The state does know if a pop is in, say, the city or the countryside, and we can potentially do things like splitting off the entire urban population into one state in a partition, if that state contains the entire city, but we haven't really gone deeply into partition mechanics as of yet. Because I don't know how you're going to be able to do it. There is no way to tell where a culture's borders are. It's all to do with jobs. You know where the jobs are, and you know who is in those jobs, but there is, as far as I can tell, no way of, like in the French Rhineland example that I gave, what is stopping a French pop, or is there any hindrance to a French pop taking a job that the game considers to be in a German or a very industrialized area of Rhineland, which a lot of German pops are in? Or is there any hindrance to that? How are you going to be able to split states along cultural lines when you don't know where cultures are other than through jobs? And it's like it's very muddy. It's not clean. Things like Albania in Macedonia, like, are they going to be able to take land there? Where's the cultural borders between Greek and Albanian in the Balkans? The absolute clusterfuck that is the Balkans in general. Where's the split between Serbian and Bosnian and Croatian? Like, we know roughly where those splits are in real life, but how is the game going to know if, like, the entire area isn't urbanized and everyone is working in mines and arable land, and these mines and arable land are crossing through these cultural borders, right? If you're looking at an entire mountainous region and there's a ton of mines there, and there is in real life, say, we're going to go with half English and half Welsh, because we're going to use a hypothetical example to not go controversial, right? Let's open up this thing again. Let's get rid of all of this. Say you've got a province here. This is all mountainous. This is all mountainous. In real life, there would be, say, the English would control this part, or I say control, but they would live there, and the Welsh would control this part, right? But the entire province, or state, I should say, is mountainous, and the majority of the industry here is full of mines. If you are going to split this state on cultural boundaries, how are you going to do it? Because these cultural lines that I've just drawn are real life only. In the game, there is no way to see where those cultures are. All it says is English pops are working in mines, Welsh pops are working in mines. We know that the mines are all over the place. So what do? They don't track the factories, or they don't track the jobs on the provincial level. They track it on the entire state level. So how is that going to work? That's not the button I wanted to press. Yeah, it's real finicky. It's the Make Victoria 3. That guy's called Make Victoria 3. That's interesting. Also, I think I've got the wrong one on there. My apologies. There we go. Yeah, I don't know how that's gonna work. I really don't. How are we gonna split off cultures? How are we gonna partition countries along cultural borders? Romania taking any more than Dobruja from Hungary, for example. How is that going to work? I don't know. It's very, very awkward. It's very muddy, and it's not something I'm entirely on board with. Are there situations where you have a claim other than when it's conquered from you? Would Prussia have a claim on Alsace, and so on? There are events and the like that can add claims, and some claims are defined historically. I don't see Prussia starting with a claim on Alsace, but they could possibly get one during the lead-up to forming Germany. It's not a thing in the current build, though. Okay. Why exactly would it be more difficult for Britain to incorporate an Indian state compared to the Falklands? Population. And the population is not an accepted one versus the Falklands, which is full of British people, I would imagine. What would be calculated for that? I guess population size and something like culture groups. Yeah. It's based on local cultures and how much they diverge from your national culture in traits. What is an isolated state region? A state region that is isolated from its market and can only buy and sell locally. So if it doesn't have enough infrastructure, for example. Or if it's over the seas and it doesn't have a good enough port. If a bigger state has more capacity to produce iron than a smaller one, like Minas Gerais and Rhineland. Size of a state isn't what's relevant here, rather than how sizable the local iron ore deposits are in the case. Okay. Does it mean the number of stars in the US flag can change in the course of the game? Yes. Why are states not called Bikana, Rajputana, and similar? Is it because this is the only state region these countries are part of? If a split state in its entirety makes up a country, we name that split state after the country for the sake of brevity. So the split state of Luxembourg is called Luxembourg instead of Luxembourgian Wallonia. That's kind of cool. I like that. But yeah, the cultural makeup of Luxembourg and Wallonia. Luxembourg is full of Germanics. Most of Wallonia is full of French speakers. And then there's some Dutch in there as well. But how are you going to split up Wallonia? if, for example, France conquers Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg, and then say the British want to come in and create Belgium again. Big mistake, we did it before, but say we make the same mistake again. We want to create Belgium. How are you going to do that? Where's the cultural borders? Where are we going to split Belgium if we're looking at doing it via culture? How is it going to work? I don't understand how you could possibly make that work. Any word on how it affects markets? Would the Rhineland states belong to one to the Prussian market and the other to the Bavarian market, or do they both belong to Prussia, as Prussia has the biggest state in the region? We already know that the Prussian market contains Bavaria. All states in the same region share a market, but we're looking at moving this to the state level. It's the reason it's on the state region level is because it's made in earlier versions of the market system. That makes sense to move it onto the state level. It may mean that things like the Channel Islands, if they're a British state in a French state region, maybe the Channel Islands will return back to the British market. We could see that. Pondicherry in India being a French possession in a majority English British market. We could see Pondicherry, if it has a good enough port, perhaps it will join the French market because it's a state. We could see that happen. We'll see. Is it possible to remove foreign claims on your lands? Or is this like the one that French core on Elas was permanent in Victoria 2? Sure, it nudged the game into a historical rivalry between the German Empire and France, but an option to recouncil either after decades of status quo or after winning a war cementing the status of Elas without taking any further territories would be nice. I would say, sure, you should be able to get a country to relinquish it. However, said country can always, like, ignore that treaty that they have made. Like the Spanish did several times with regards to Gibraltar. We told them, we conquered it from them. I'm pretty sure that was during the War of Spanish Succession that we first took that, I believe. I might be wrong on that one, though. And then multiple wars after that, we confirmed that, yeah, we are the owners of Gibraltar, and the Spanish agreed, and then made claims to Gibraltar again. So, claims coming back that have previously been removed would probably also be pretty historical. In Victoria 2, I might say removing the cores of one a great war against France. Yeah, whatever. It's possible to force countries to relinquish claims. Good, but hopefully that's not the be-all and end-all. And this here is the important one, right? This is talking, again, about splitting a state along cultural lines. How would that work if the game doesn't know where cultures live within the state? We know what pops are in which buildings, and we know where the different city hubs are in the state, and we can reasonably compute which province a given number of levels of building might be in. What this means is that we can determine as needed which pop might be in which province. This is then used to determine which pops, building level, etc. go where in case of a split. That's, well, good though, but what about like a culture map mode? How's that going to work? Are we going to see just, I don't know, like hashed lines for culture colors across an entire state rather than like very definitive, or not even definitive, but like clear borders for cultures? Because, yeah, cultures definitely bleed into each other when they're living like that. But if there's, say, a mountain in the middle of the state, and there's, you know, one culture on one side of the mountain and another culture on the other side of the mountain, how is that going to work? It's just, I don't know if this way of we can determine as needed. Well, as needed is when I open the culture map mode, right? Are you going to compute it every time I open that? Or is there not going to be a culture map mode, in which case, oh my god, there's not going to be a culture map mode, let's all rebel, right? Because that needs to be a thing, right? Surely. Yeah, This saves us from tracking the mostly useless information. I don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that being mostly useless information. Of which pop is in which province at any given time, which would bloat the game a lot, but still lets us approximate it as needed. Otherwise, we'd have to, for example, split a single peasant pop of 1 million people into 50 pops of 20,000 people each. if those peasants are equally spread across the nation's 50 provinces, or states' 50 provinces, even though by our game rules they could all pack up and take another job in the same state tomorrow. Yeah, here! They could all pack up and take another job in the same state tomorrow. So the French pops in the Rhineland can all pack up and take jobs alongside Germans, and then if you're going to culturally split the Rhineland along those cultural lines, how? I don't get it. This is the most confusing part for me. How is that going to work? I really would like a bit more clarification on that. But that's kind of it. That's kind of my only kind of gripe with this. Everything else about states look great, but not knowing where a pop is, I don't know. I feel like that's going to come with problems. I really do. But what do you think? Let me know in the comment section below if you agree with me and that this could be done better, or if you disagree with how this is done, or whatever. Right? I know that on Reddit there has been some people already complaining about the way that this is working, and I have to say that I kind of agree with them. I am not here to just agree with absolutely everything that is said in the dev diaries, right? I have opinions, and I'm not going to be biased about those opinions. I'm just going to say my mind. There are things that I like, there are things that I don't like. This part here is something that I don't like, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. So yeah, maybe it's just that I don't understand it enough, and that, oh, it's actually going to work out just fine. Look, here is an example of blah, 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 right? Maybe that is going to be how it works. But I don't think it's like that. I do think there are going to be problems. But yeah, like I said, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I would very much like to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one, where we're going to be talking about the thing that we were told that we were going to be talking about, which I've forgotten already. What was it again? Pretty sure they said what it was going to be. I can't remember. But we're going to be talking about it next time. I can't remember what it is because I got a terrible memory. But whatever. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.